That's great. Thanks, Mark. Are we recording?
Yes, Chair, we just started now and streaming.
Marvellous. Thank you. Welcome, everybody, then, to this session of, it's an extraordinary session, before I say, of Corporate and Performance Scrutiny Committee on the 24th of April. Before we get going, I have to just go through the protocol of announcements, so bear with me. So please can I remind everybody present, this hybrid meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording will be archived for future viewing. If a participant wishes to speak, they can by raising their hand in person if you're sat in the chamber, or by using the remote raise hand function located on the bottom left-hand side of the screen. This will then put you in the speaker queue accordingly. When subsequently invited to speak by myself, please then press your activation button in the bottom centre of your screen. Please be patient and aware that there will be a small time lag and that you do not need to press the button again. The response of the system is not instant. If the button or desk microphone changes to red, then it has responded. If a participant raises their hand via the remote function and is not subsequently invited to address by myself, please could they turn their camera on to indicate or place a message in the chat function. When invited to speak by myself, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this is not possible for any reason, please bring this to the attention of myself or the Democratic Services Officer as soon as possible. Once you've participated, please remember to turn your activation button off as not to delay other participants from coming onto the screen and to avoid any background noise or feedback when others are speaking. Please ensure all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of this recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and or to grab the attention of myself or the Democratic Services Officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, they should let myself or the Democratic Services Officer know. If a remote committee member has a prejudicial interest and is therefore required to withdraw from this meeting, the Democratic Services Officer will place that participant in the virtual waiting room until such time that the interested item has concluded. Please do not close your browser down whilst you're in this waiting room, as the Democratic Services Officer will bring you back into the meeting automatically when appropriate. For members attending the meeting in person, they will be asked to leave the chamber for the duration of this interested item, and then they'll be invited back into the room as appropriate. If an electronic vote is called during the course of the meeting, then advice on how to participate will be given accordingly to committee members with voting rights at the time. If the Welsh language is spoken during the meeting, then a simultaneous translation will be available to listen to. And for meeting participants in the council chamber, a translation receiver and headset are available at each seat for your use at the appropriate time. For remote meeting participants, a language selection is available under the Audio Settings tab on the left-hand side of your screen. And this translation will also be audible by the live stream for the meeting for any persons who are observing only. Okay, thank you. If we move then on to part one, which is our apologies for absence. I don't know if we've had any today, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Stephen Haynes is unwell and Councillor Wood may be running slightly late, so I'm not sure if he's on the call. Thank you. Just Councillor Haynes then.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Please send my best wishes to Councillor Haynes as well for a speedy recovery. Agenda item 2.
Just to say, Chair, other than obviously Councillor Haynes, we got, all the other members are either in the chamber or online for the committee.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. Agenda item 2. Now, these are minutes from the meeting held on the 20th of March, 2024. I trust we've all read and taken in the information there. So if everybody is happy, can I have a hand to move, please?
Happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and a seconder.
Chair, you can second those yourself if you're happy to.
I will second them myself. That's great. Thank you. Let's move on to agenda item 3. This is declarations of interest and nature of such interest. Any councillors with any interest, please declare now.
Chair?
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Please
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Can I declare as a personal interest on item 4, just to say that my mother was the chair of a community centre that received warm space funding, which is referenced to in the report. However, it's a personal interest. It's not prejudicial, so I will not leave the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Councillor Franks.
Councillor Franks, it looks like your screen's come on. Oh, there we are. You come on now. There we are. You're there now.
Okay. Sorry. Similar to Ewan, declare an interest in the Warm Space Initiative in respect of Dinas Library, to which you are all cordially invited.
Thank you, Councillor Franks. Do we have any other declarations of interest at this stage? No? Okay. That's great. Agenda item 4 then, which is the report of the Director of the Corporate Resources, work to tackle poverty and the current cost of living crisis. I think we have Tom to take us through this report. We do. Councillor Franks, do you want to take yourself off? There you are. Great. Thank you, Tom. Over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair, and thank you, committee, for taking this report this evening. I'm joined this evening by my colleague Andreas, who works in the Council's policy team. Andreas has pulled together this report, so I thought it would be useful if he came along to committee this evening to present with me as well. We'll just take you through the headlines. It's quite a detailed report by design, but just to give you some of the headlines. As members are aware, the cost of living crisis is a critical challenge within the Council's annual delivery plan this year, and we've also set out that tackling poverty is one of the key drivers for our work, both as an organisation but also in partnership with the Public Services Board. And when we brought this report, or a report on this subject, to you members in October of last year, we committed to undertaking 6 monthly reports on this particular subject. That's in addition to the references that will automatically be made in the quarterly performance monitoring reports, and that's consistent with the reporting that we do on Project Zero as well. So there is a significant amount of work underway in terms of this agenda, and this report attempts to give you a summary or an overview of that work. It also gives you an update in terms of the use of the Council's cost of living reserve that was established in March 2023 and how that funding has been used. So in terms of the key issues for consideration, the report gives you an update on a variety of different areas of the Council's work. Appendix A also provides an extract from the Council's performance indicator framework, and it's proposed that it's this collection of performance indicators that we will look at holistically in order to provide you with some quantitative data in terms of our work on the cost of living crisis, and that will be supplemented obviously with the qualitative information that's in the report. So I think Andreas is going to start with an overview of the impacts of deprivation and the cost of living crisis within the Vale.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. The impacts of deprivation, cost of living crisis in the Vale. So to begin with, we sort of brought some of this economic data together to set that scene of what's happening in the Vale. So we can see that the cost of living has continued to cause hardship with increasing issues of affordability, especially regards to food, energy and housing. I think that will come out as we go through this, the different work strands. There's data here from more local economic data talking about universal credit. We can see people on universal credit both in and out of employment. We've also the inflation data, so it peaked at 11.1% in October 2022. It's since come down, but it's still remained quite high and above, obviously, the Bank of England's 2% target. Information here from the Trussell Trust food banks and the increase in food parcels that were distributed. Coming on then to the recent national policy developments, We can see the Welsh Benefits Charter has recently been developed that has aims for the Welsh benefit system. And this is really about making it easier for people to access benefits they're entitled to. And I think this will, as it develops, will start to impact a lot of the work strands of the council. There's also the Welsh Government's Child Poverty Strategy that has recently been published. Coming on then to some of the key activities, and there's really, really good work that's been going on across the council here. So we can see support with employment. 426 individuals have been helped through employability projects, and there's different ways that this outreach has happened to help people find work, to upskill, to volunteer, to start a business, with specialist workers also working in the rural Vale to help those economically inactive individuals. There's also been a huge focus on youth employment and getting young people's skills ready for the workforce, with several work placements within the council as well for young people. And lots of partnership working as well around employability, with employability support in lots of different community venues across the Vale. Coming on to support for families and young people, huge amount of work that's been done here. Our youth service has worked to support young people through various financial support, with their venues and clubs being open to all. Sorry, is the mic good? Okay. Opening their venues is free to access with different free activities and food and drinks. There's been a lot of work with young people at risk of homelessness supported. Youth Service has also worked with partners to increase half-term activities, and where possible making sure these are free, and there's also options of support and advice there as well. Uniform groups have been supported with £12,000 used to subsidise annual memberships for all young people who need it. The Energise Youth project is a partnership project between the Youth Service and the Sports Development team. It's working to increase physical activity rates of young people through free sports activities and also providing funding for sports equipment, so removing those barriers to access, making sure everyone's got access to sports and healthier activities. There's data here around our free school meals and school essentials grants provision, and also free period dignity products. I think passing back over to you now, Tom.
Thanks, Andreas. And just building on some of the work that Andreas has just been describing, the report then goes on to talk, members, about some of the work that is underway within our schools. And in a number of schools, they're at the forefront of undertaking the response to the difficulties that many people are experiencing in this area. A number of schools now run Big Box Boyd and other food and advice projects. And increasingly, we're seeing those being delivered in partnership with other organisations such as Citizens Advice and indeed ourselves, as local authority departments as well. One particular or notable example of a new piece of work that has been underway in the last 10 or 11 months is the Pencoitra Learning Community, a thriving community project, which we're bringing together the primary schools and the secondary school in the Pencoitra cluster alongside council departments to look at how we can most effectively work together and break down some of the barriers that may historically have existed, and indeed look at bringing in our partners as well. And that is starting to deliver some tangible results. It was really pleasing to hear from colleagues at the school today when we brought them back together to get an update on the three subgroups work around healthy, safe and secure, and seeing some tangible work happening there. The report then provides members with some information around housing and council tax reduction. Just as Andreas was describing some of the data earlier on, this section of the report talks about private sector rent having risen by around 12% in the last year, and average rents are now nearly double the local housing allowance. There are currently, when the report was authored, no homes, for example, available to rent privately at the level of the local housing allowance rate. And increasing private rents has meant more households joining the housing waiting list, which is the time of publication risen to over 6,200 people. And there's also been, as members are aware, an increased use of temporary accommodation, with over 300 households having been placed in temporary accommodation. The report sets out details around council housing rent arrears, remaining high with over 1,600 council housing tenants in arrears, with average debts rising to £562. And the report notes the work that the housing team are doing in terms of providing support and advice specifically to tenants who are facing those rent arrears, as well as a range of community investment projects and initiatives to assist tenants to improve the quality of life. The report as well notes the number of residents currently being supported with council tax reduction, just under 9,000, with a forecast of the value of those reductions set to be just over £12 million. The Pencoitra work that I mentioned in terms of the school is happening in parallel with a piece of work that the Public Services Board are doing. They've established a work stream that is a priority for the partnership around working in our most deprived areas. The WIMD report, the Wales Index of Multiple Deprivation, identifies that 3 areas within the Vale are within the top 10 most deprived in Wales, and the report provides details of where those areas are. And the work of the PSB is intended to bring together the public sector partners and the third sector in order to look at how we can change some of the ways that we're working and work alongside people in that community. And the Pencoitra school work is a contributor to that work. The report then goes on, members, to talk about the work to tackle food insecurity, noting that the council continues to be involved in a range of different projects, including the food bank, big box board across schools, food pantries such as the GVS food share at CF61 in Llantrwit Major and the Penarth food pod. Welsh Government recently awarded an additional amount of grant funding. You'll remember from your October report that we've received a series of grant streams to support cost of living and in particular food security issues. And the report gives you some examples of how those have been used and the work that is underway in partnership with our colleagues in public health as part of the Vale food partnership and the work that is taking place across the county and increasingly in the rural Vale. So some information there about the Wick Food Hub, for example. The report then, and Rachel Connor may well touch on this in a later agenda item regarding the GVS annual report, but really proud of the work that is underway in Llantrwit Major at that food project, bringing together a series of partners, not only to provide access to food, but also to clothes and to a series of advice services as well. And indeed, that work was recognised by Ystadau Cymru, which is the national assets group that is run by Welsh Government, and they awarded that project the overall winner in the latter part of last year. And that work is now extending into St Athan as well.
So coming on to the Energy Company Obligation Force, so the Eco4 scheme. It's the latest UK government scheme to help deliver energy efficiency measures to households. So officers, and this is quite recent, officers are working in partnership to support poorly insulated households and make them more energy efficient, and then they can save on energy bills. And information about the scheme is up on our website. I think to date there's been 10 applications. I wouldn't be surprised if more have been received since then, and there'll be another update on that with the next report that comes. Coming to tackling loneliness and isolation. The report details information about loneliness and social isolation Welsh Government grant funding has been used to develop an old people's hub in the Western Vale, working in partnership with GVS and Age Connects, as well as a smaller grassroots community fund stream for third sector organisations. The Age Friendly team have been working with the 50 Plus Forum to deliver activities and events to combat social isolation, as well as intergenerational activities that have been delivered, such as the community garden at Crawshaw Court, and the PSB also hosted an event to celebrate age-friendly status in the Vale. So finally, I think warm spaces. You may remember the warm spaces scheme, the warm welcome scheme was delivered, I think, in 2022, and this was a network of community hubs across the Vale, offering a free social space, often with free drinks, snacks, support and advice, whatever the community organisation felt was most appropriate for the area. And although no Welsh Government funding was received this year, the map and directory of different warm spaces has remained on the council's Council Living Support web pages and has been regularly updated. The council also utilised a proportion of the cost of living reserve, and that was detailed further in this report, to support existing and some new warm spaces at the beginning of this year.
And just finally, in terms of some of the key issues for members to note, those cost of living web pages that Andreas just mentioned have continued to be updated with the latest range of information and advice for residents and for businesses as the cost of living has changed in terms of some of the emphasis and has been viewed by just over 9,000 individual visitors to that. The report then talks about the Value in the Vale volunteering scheme that members will be aware of as part of the Public Services Board work. That's been an extension of an existing time banking scheme that was originally focused exclusively on council housing tenants, but has now since been broadened as well. The report then, members, gives you an overview of how council funding has been used to support this particular critical challenge. You've got some details there about shared prosperity funding. Just under £4 million has been committed to the Communities in Place projects across the Vale. Some of those examples include services for young people, such as leisure activities, and also that funding is being used to support the Public Services Board work that I mentioned earlier. Pleased as well that we've been able to work in partnership with GVS, who've set up a grant scheme for community organisations seeking small grants from SBF as well. And as I mentioned earlier, around the cost of living reserve, the report sets out an update for elected members following the report that you had in October, showing the way that money has been invested, a range of issues such as free school meals, an additional contribution to citizens' advice, the extension of free school meals across the summer holiday, and also an additional contribution to the food bank alongside a separate community project scheme are all mentioned within that section of the report, in addition to an additional allocation to discretionary housing payments of another £50,000. And in terms of the kind of strategic context for this work, in a recent meeting of this committee, we discussed the reshaping programme and the strengthening communities theme. And this work very much sits as a central plank to that part of the transformation programme, and members will be seeing a report in the coming months detailing how all of those elements fit together. So apologies that I know that's been quite a detailed run through of the report, but there is lots going on, and obviously very happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Committee is really grateful for all of the efforts of officers in this remit, and it's really good to know there are lots of projects and lots of help out there. Before I open up to members for questions, can I just ask two of my own, if that's okay? Can I ask, what are we doing to ensure residents in rural areas with limited access to public transport, what are we doing for them to help them access crisis services? And my second question is to do with social enterprises, because back in October, this committee had a report from Audit Wales. I think it was called Social Enterprises, Missed Opportunities. So since then, I'm interested to know what have we done to encourage social enterprises and the development of new ones in the Vale. What have we done to provide opportunities for them to access quotes and tenders that that we might, as an authority, issue? And what are we doing to support them to become more self-sufficient as well and less reliant on grant funding? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. In terms of your first question relating to residents in rural areas, the report notes a range of different services that we are starting to establish, particularly around the support project for food for residents in WEC. We've also had the recent extension as part of the the Llantrwit Major project, where we've been able to use some of the National Lottery money that project has attracted in order to be able to open a separate facility at the Gathering Place in St Athan that is operating on a similar model now to that of CF61. You are absolutely right, though, that we need to continue to look at what services are available in terms of supporting residents in the rural Vale. And I know that, having met with colleagues, certainly from the Food Vale partnership earlier on this week, where we've got some additional funding forthcoming, that we're looking now specifically at how we can make sure that we've got that appropriate level of coverage across the county. Turning to your question around social enterprise, and since your committee received that report from Audit Wales, we've engaged with Compass, who are doing some work in partnership with us in how we respond collectively to the Audit Wales report. So you'll remember we had the one around social enterprise, we also had one around tackling poverty, and then a local study relating to the council's relationship and ways of working with the voluntary sector more broadly, and it felt sensible to us to collectively tackle those reports. And Compass have been working with us in a series of ways over the last few months. Specifically relating to your question around social enterprise, we had a meeting with colleagues from the sector and also from social services, specifically looking at the requirements of Section 16 of the relevant act in terms of social care provision, which requires us to use or to work with social enterprises rather. That was a really constructive meeting, and I think there's some learning coming out of that we can apply elsewhere. We've also used Compass's experience to upskill some of our colleagues as well. So we've held a workshop in the last couple of months to raise awareness of what social enterprise is, what it isn't, and also we've commissioned Compass to do some work to look at the social enterprise sector across the Vale, to do exactly as you say, look at how we can potentially extend that. And it was good that Dr. Sarah Evans from Compass was able to come to the Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee a week or so ago to present the initial findings. And that committee provided a little bit of further direction in terms of how we take forward that work. And that will form an integral part of that strengthening communities piece that I mentioned previously. I hope that's okay.
Thank you, Tom. That's really, really good news. Essential for us to understand, first and foremost, where we've got social enterprises and what their offer is, because obviously until we understand that, we don't know what work we have that could possibly and potentially be something that they could bid for. That's great. Thank you. Do we have anyone else now who'd like to ask questions? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. First off, I want to give a bit of praise. I know that doesn't happen too regularly in this committee, but there's a lot of good stuff here in this report. Firstly, I wanted to thank Councillor Lovelock-Edwards and the whole Age Friendly team for the invite to the working event in Penarth this afternoon to learn more about the work going on in the Age Friendly strategy that's coming to us later in the summer. So that's been fantastic to hear about, and working with young people and older people who have the same priorities in many aspects to try and make our services better and a better place to live. I also wanted to mention the housing debts. That is a really positive thing to hear, that the work directly impacts individual people of our housing team, to see that people are able to have more staggered payments, to see that people are being treated as people with their debts. Now, obviously, we don't want the number to get too high. We're still, an organisation under monetary pressure after all, but it's really good to see the actual fiscal impact of our policy, that if you speak to us, engage with our housing team, if you're falling behind, if you're struggling to pay the bills, please talk to a housing officer. So that's really good to hear about. Now, sadly, this is not a praising committee, this is a scrutiny committee. So firstly, I wanted to mention that it's a little bit sad in a cost of living crisis not to have seen more new schemes coming through in the past couple of years that weren't funded by external government. Now, obviously, we are struggling ourselves with financial instability, but it would be nice to see in a cost of living crisis more new schemes. That's a very broad criticism, though. I wanted to ask, I don't know if Andreas or Tom has any information about the C-card scheme, because I've recently been told that the new officer for the C-card scheme that we recently had appointed only but a few months ago, really, had sadly left the scheme. And that was for the first time since the pandemic we had an officer that was really interested in getting the C card widespread as it used to be in the Vale. So any information on that would be interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Goodjohn. And absolutely, in terms of wanting to see more new schemes, I shared the same sentiment. And the report in the funding section where we talk about the use of the council's cost of living reserve, there's a paragraph in there that is really quite telling, I think. And let me just find the reference for you a moment. So yeah, paragraph 2.63, where we set a £25,000 envelope around a community project scheme, and we asked, we did an open call that we published quite widely, promoted quite widely, approaching some of our existing projects, but also inviting new ones. And there were 75 applications that were received for that particular fund. I would say the vast majority of them were really worthwhile schemes, but there was obviously only a finite amount of money available, and we were keen to make sure that we saw some impact as a result of the council having established that reserve. So in total, 31 of those applications were funded, ranging from between £100, because a small amount in some of these instances can make a big difference. We've got some very entrepreneurial and creative community groups, up to about 2,500. But I think what's interesting for us as a team was that we saw for the first time lots of applications coming from our schools to support families with the provision of additional free school uniform, in addition to some of that work around the established warm spaces and food projects. So we maintain that desire to be as creative and inclusive as we can do in the use of this funding. And the additional money that I mentioned that's been forthcoming from Welsh Government in the last couple of weeks around food insecurity, we'll be looking to take a similar kind of approach to. So perhaps with committee's agreement, I can make sure that the next time we bring this report to you, perhaps we show you what's new and what's existing and ongoing, so you can kind of see how things are changing.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Goodjohn, do you want to come back in on any of those points? Or
Yeah, sorry.
Have any more tonight?
Sorry, if you have no information on C-card, then that's fine. You don't. Okay, fine. So I just wanted to bring it up here now, because the Youth Forum has been doing quite a bit of work on this, and has found that it's been very difficult for a lot of people, young people, to access the C-card scheme, and that before the pandemic there was a huge amount of providers, and since then there has been a real danger in public health from that. And we were starting to see a bit of progress from the new officer. So it'd be interesting if there's any information afterwards you can get on that. And I hope it can be raised again as an issue that we can hopefully work to solving. And it's good to see the youth service getting actively involved in that as well. So fingers crossed. I just wanted to ask on one other thing, which is on the free school meals, which was a lifesaver. It was absolutely incredible to see last year in 23 that the council decided that in absence of Welsh Government funding, that we would provide free school meals in the school holidays, in the summer school holidays. With looking at the cost of living reserve, it doesn't look like we have the money to do that this year, quite frankly. And I'd be really interested if there's been any consideration whatsoever of doing it again this year. As I believe the announcement from Welsh Government is not happening from Welsh Government funds. So has there been any consideration at all about the possibility of doing it again this year?
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. You're right in the sense that the current envelope that's available through that reserve wouldn't support being able to deliver that, but some discussions are underway in terms of how we use all council reserves and what we would look to do them to use them for. That said, we haven't had any specific conversations around extending the provision into this summer holiday as yet. I am aware that we continue to work with colleagues in public health and the health service in terms of some of that provision that is on a more targeted basis within schools during the summer holiday. But I can certainly get an update for committee to let you know what's planned within schools over the summer holiday.
Thank you very much, Chair. That's all from me.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Councillor Goodjohn. Any other questions from Councillor Johnson? I think you just got in there before Councillor Edwards.
Oh, if Belinda wants to go first, that's fine.
I think she's deferred to you. Oh no, here she comes.
No, I was deferring to Councillor Johnson. I will sit and wait patiently and wait to hear what he has to say too. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson, over to you.
No, after you know. Okay,
I know.
So I'll be speaking in Welsh. So I'll just provide everyone with a moment to put their headphones on. Thank you to Andreas and Tom for the report and the presentation. It's of course interesting to see and to hear about all of the work which is being provided by the council and in collaboration with other organisations. The narrative is quite a big one. So I've got a number of questions, but firstly, taking into consideration how the report looks and how we present information in future, because this is so broad, it's quite difficult to follow, in my humble opinion, because you touch on so many things. So I don't know what the best way is to present this, but if we consider other work which comes before this committee, perhaps some sort of appendix or table explaining how much the programmes ran, adding to Councillor Goodjohn's and other comments, so how long they'd run, what the expectations were for the project, who funded them, what the progress rating is on this. We don't always know with this what sort of impact it's having through the project, and this is important because with cost of living crisis, of course, it's essentially something which is outside of our control as a council. This is dependent on other factors such as UK government decisions and the general economic climate. So it's worth us knowing whether the money coming from Welsh government or from somebody else with constraints, do we believe that the money is being well used? Is it then possible for us to consider what other sort of things can be done? And I know this is difficult to put in a table, but perhaps instead of paragraph after paragraph saying we've spent this or we've spent this, it feels like a process, and I'm not sure I'm understanding the outcomes because of this. So the report touches on a lot of very different initiatives, but I'm not sure whether it's drawn together in a way which is possible for me to see the true impacts of all of it. Saying this, I've got a couple of specific questions. If I start with the reserve, the cost of living reserve and how much money has been spent. At one point, Councillor Goodjohn has already raised the point about the free school meals and the spend that we've given out of the reserve. Of course, last month, Welsh Government admitted in the High Court that they were breaking the Welsh law by not providing these meals. So I want to know, I can see what's coming out of our coffers, but in reality, they are breaking the law by not providing the funding for this. So what about the discussion with LWLGA and others in terms of how we will address this? Because I don't think it's acceptable for the government to simply turn around and say, oh, we're breaking our own law, and it doesn't matter. It's not acceptable to me at all. I'd like to ask a question about the discretionary housing payments. We've earmarked an additional 50,000 for this, but it says that the money available is 33,000 to all intents and purposes at the bottom, paragraph 2.64. Is this money which is available for the year which has just come to an end? Is this therefore being added to next year? And therefore, are we continuing to add to 50,000, or does this depend on the demand for the DHP? If that could just be a bit unpacked. I'd like to understand, because Tom, you mentioned about the applications, which were much bigger than the spend for community projects. Now, of course, I don't know exactly what the projects were that Tom has talked about, things which already exist but perhaps need a bit of additional assistance. Why did you stop at 25,000 and didn't look at towards moving other money around, such as the 50,000 and DHP? Why is there money left over at the end of the financial year where there was obviously demand? Because if that cap wasn't because of the standard of the applications, why didn't you move the money across? Got another number of other questions. I'll just very quickly, I'll point the finger exactly like the other councillor, but from the other side of the prism in terms of the rent arrears. 1,600 tenants in debt. As far as I can see, this is a third. This is 4,000, which we have, and of course there's quite a significant percentage receiving allowance for rent too. So this strikes me as quite a high percentage of the remainder who are in arrears or in debt. So I accept the point that if they're working with us, but I do have a organisational memory of this type of report coming to us a decade ago about changes to DWP payments and so forth, and universal credit, and looking at this, and the attitude hasn't changed, but the debts are continuing to increase. And I know that some of this is outside of our control, but again, we did increase our rent by almost 7%, and a number of people in debt are continuing to go up. One last point, just because it's something that I raised or picked up earlier this year. A number of these projects are not so new. They're things which have been rebranded over the years. Support and advice for young people in terms of the jobs market is something that the council has done for many years. So when I see figures, I want to know to which extent this is better or worse than previous schemes, because of course this work was being undertaken by the councils and under the themes, and of course these came to an end because the cash flows or money changed. Are we reinventing the wheel, or are we doing better under the new brand? Or is it just the same people doing the same work with the same outcomes, good or bad? So a number of questions there. Thank you. Any answer, any response, Andres and Tom?
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. If you don't mind, if I kind of combine a couple of them in response. I think the point that you made lastly around those rebranded projects, or where we're trying to bring a variety of different schemes together to see what the focus should be, or the impact that we're looking for, I think plays into your first point around the structure. And thank you for the feedback on how the report is presented, because we genuinely want to present this in the best way for elected members to be able to see the output, but really importantly, the outcome of an impact of the work. And I think there's something for Andreas and I to take away from this evening, which is how can we look at structuring the report around a series of themes, perhaps on cost of living, but making it really clear, as you were suggesting, on a scheme by scheme basis. How is it funded? What's it intended to do? What's the impact that it's already had? And a little bit perhaps of the chronology or the timeline behind it, if those things have existed for a while. So we'll certainly have a look at how we can present the report, because I agree with you. There's loads in it, but it is sometimes a little bit heavy going to get through the detail and actually see those outcomes, and we'll do that piece of work. In terms of the discretionary housing payments, my understanding is that any balance does roll over, but I will check that with my finance colleagues tomorrow morning and confirm with you. And ditto the detail behind the rent arrears, if that's okay. My understanding is that a report has been to a committee relatively recently, I think, with some of that detail in it. But I'll ask for some updated figures, and equally, as you were asking, Councillor Johnson, the what's behind those numbers in terms of the profile of where that debt is falling across different tenants who may be receiving or not other types of support, so we can see the picture. So I can certainly do that one. And in terms of the free school meals piece, I'll pick up with my colleagues in Learning and Skills to find out what discussions they've been having with the WRGA. I'm aware that there were certainly discussions last year relating to free school meals, and I'll make sure that we get an update circulated to committee if that's acceptable for you. Oh, and finally, sorry, Councillor Johnson, you asked about the applications to the £25,000 community grant scheme exceeding that value. I should have mentioned when presenting the report that for those projects or those initiatives where we weren't able to meet them from the reserve funding, we signposted, I say we, Andreas signposted them to a range of different schemes as well. So we made some additional use of things like the discretionary cost of living and food insecurity funding, for example. And I was also grateful to colleagues in education who were able to step in and make some additional contributions as well. So I think that's probably a really good example of where, if we'd have moved that community scheme into the kind of presentation format that you'd suggested, you'd have seen £25,000 coming as a contribution from the council's reserve, but then a series of other contributions, so that it doesn't look like it's just been curtailed in that way.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Johnson, do you want to come back in on any of those points, or you?
I'm fine at the moment, I think. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. And we're definitely going to put the recommendation of the report to be structured differently, categorised outcomes and timelines and costings for the projects. I think that's a really sensible, good recommendation. Councillor Cowell, over to you. Okay.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies if I struggle to refer to the papers. I don't have internet connection in here via my laptop, so I'm using my phone to read what is a detailed report as as I'm sure you appreciate. I just think it would be remiss of me to discuss this report without discussing or mentioning council tax, because it is something over which this authority has control, the amount that it charges residents for services. And obviously, when the council tax goes up, that puts an increased pressure on residents' household budgets and their ability to pay their bills. So I think it's important when we look at the council tax and set it, I actually think a consideration to this report or the work that's done within this report would be helpful, because I think it would perhaps focus some minds on whether the authority needs to be more efficient in how it spends its money so that it doesn't pass those costs on to residents. I appreciate that there are references to the council tax reduction scheme in the report. I think that was welcomed, and I do offer praise as well as critique. I think it was good to see that. But as I said, I think when it comes to setting the council tax, it would be helpful if there was more emphasis on the impacts that rising the council tax does place on some of the most vulnerable people in the county. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. Tom, do you want to come in on?
Yes, certainly, Chair, and thank you. Councillor Carroll, for the question. And certainly, I'll take the feedback back to the team and perhaps look at within the budget papers that we present for, or rather the Cabinet present to yourselves at Council, how we could potentially look at exploring that issue around council tax impact. Thank you for recognising the inclusion of the council tax reduction scheme information. That was as a direct result of the feedback that you gave at the previous committee relating to council tax, and I know it's a point that that you wanted to make again this evening. So I'll certainly have a look at how we can do that, and indeed there may be some information relating to council tax collection that might be useful for us to play into to this report in a similar way to that you've seen around housing payment arrears or rent arrears. So we'll certainly have a look at it.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tom. Councillor Lovelock-Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make a few comments in relation to the Welsh Benefits Charter that all local authorities, including this one, have signed up to. And within the report, it states that 4,356 families were claiming universal credit. And they were actually working. So that is obviously quite a worrying position. And from my own personal view is that universal credit is persistently pushing more people into debt. So whilst the Welsh Benefits Charter is evolving, I was interested to learn how to, as the DWP persistently fails to publish any adequate data or information on how to claim, I worry that having read the Child Poverty Action Group's recent report, that there are nearly 1 million people across the UK who haven't claimed despite being entitled to. So whilst we are sort of looking at future programmes of work, is there any capacity that whilst we acknowledge that we can't slow down the impact of the UK government decisions, is there any ability for us to use this charter as it's sort of growing to do some work on raising awareness on what a person in work or out can claim? I know there's been some local initiatives around pension credit and raising awareness on a person's ability to claim that. But as so many people are clearly not aware of what they can claim and they are entitled to, then as a council, could we do something around that in, as a sort of potential body of work? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards. Absolutely. In terms of the capacity to raise awareness of different types of entitlements, we've traditionally run a series of different campaigns, particularly looking at focusing in on older people's benefits, so pension credit, for example, where sometimes people aren't aware of the entitlements that are available to them. But certainly I'll undertake to have a discussion with the team and with the communications team as well, in terms of can we do some more of that to keep pushing those messages through. And we had a conversation as part of that workshop at Pencoitra this afternoon about communications and what's the most effective and efficient way of meeting families' needs and the information and communication that we need to get out to those. And there was some really interesting reflection from colleagues about not relying entirely on social media, the importance of there being people who are knowledgeable within those settings that can talk to different families, and also the provision of newsletters, that kind of stuff. So what I'll do is I'll if it's okay with you, Councillor, as part of that, I'll make sure that there's a very strong emphasis around entitlements and benefits as well as part of that work.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards. In my experience at the moment, through the food bank that I'm volunteering at, single parents especially have commented a couple of times to me on difficulties they're having, and they're on universal credit with part-time work, whether increasing their hours is going to affect and how it's going to affect their universal credit, how it's going to affect their taxation, issues trying to contact their work coach at DWP, and even using the journal to put questions forward, not having responses. So I think a piece of work as Councillor Lovelock-Edwards has suggested would be really helpful for them. That would be really good. Anybody else got any questions? No? Okay, that's brilliant. If we can move then to the recommendations, and I'd like to add that one from Councillor Johnson on revisiting the format of this report, because I think that's a really, really helpful one. It will help committee. I think it'll also help officers to see exactly what they've got and the outcomes. So if we go to the recommendations, so committee considers work being undertaken. We've just done that. The committee considers the Welsh Benefits Charter and the Welsh Child Poverty Strategy. Yes, we've done that too. We note the use of the cost of living reserve. Yeah, we've considered if future reports on the cost of living should be reported to Homes and Safe Community Scrutiny Committee. I think that's a good idea. So committee supports that. We'll leave that there. And also that the committee report refers this report and our comments to Cabinet for their consideration. So happy with all of that. I'll have a hand to move, please.
Chair,
Thank you, Councillor.
Sorry,
Councillor
can I ask the officers if there's any possibility of a recommendation regarding the free school meals at summer holidays and information regarding that? I mean, I don't know if to push it as far as to recommend that we that the Cabinet looks at providing that support. I don't know if Councillor Johnson would agree with me on that, but I definitely think it needs to be looked at. I definitely want the information, but I don't know whether to push it as far as a recommendation. I would recommend that the Cabinet consider providing the support so that they can look at it. They definitely look at it 100%, and we'll see what the cost implications of that is, and they can consider whether to do that or not.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. If committee would like to consider an additional recommendation that Cabinet considers the position that we're in for the summer holidays, if we aren't going to be able to support free school meals because Welsh Government aren't going to, and that's in addition to obviously officers going back to WGLA to push for this particular matter. Do we have consensus on that as an additional recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Carroll.
Yeah, I'd be happy for them to look at it, look at the costs and the benefits and explore it,
Yeah.
and then obviously decisions can be made as to feasibility once that work has been carried out.
Okay. So if we have no dissent on that one, that's an additional recommendation, Mark, if that's okay.
Yep, fine, I'll include that, Chair.
Got that. Marvellous. Thank you. Right then, we'll move on that one then, if everybody's happy. I think there was a flurry of hands before.
Happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor Good John. Thank you. And seconder, Lovelock Edwards. Thank you ever so much. Okay, let's move to agenda item 5. This is the required learning review. I think we've got Tracy to take us through this. We do.
Yeah,
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Chair, and yes, thank you for the opportunity to bring this report. So this report just details some information in relation to required or mandated learning that we offer within the local authority. I've used both the terms required and mandated intermittently. It's just in terms of language. Some people have a preference for mandated and others in terms of required learning. So as a local authority and employer, we currently provide a number of modules of required learning or mandated learning, which an employee has to complete as part of their induction process, and then at regular intervals subsequently during their employment, and this is entitled workplace compliance. The requirement to complete at regular intervals depends on job role and recommendations that may be given by separate independent parties. So if I'll just draw your attention to a couple of areas from the report. So in Section 2, for instance, we talk about the 9 areas of required learning that we currently have as a local authority. I'll draw your attention that the first 3, which is health, safety and wellbeing, ICT code of conduct and whistleblowing, aren't actually modules of training or learning. More so, they are requirements for staff members to read those relevant processes or code of conduct and to tick to say that they've got a level of understanding. And we check that with individuals over regular periods. The further list are actual e-learning modules, and you can see from that section that some of them are produced as Welsh Government e-learning modules or Social Care Wales e-learning modules. Others are e-learning modules that we've developed internally as a requirement from a competence perspective or from a cultural perspective as an organisation. And so 2.3 draws attention to completion rates for the training, and as you can see, the lowest completion rate there is 78.75%, and we actively report on that through our regular DMT meetings, through the HR dashboards with the departments. I'll just seek to raise to you here that it will be very difficult for us ever to achieve 100%, and that is because at regular times that training will drop off, and there will be a period of time where that individual will have to go back in and log in and undertake that training, and that will be a little bit of a movable feast. 2.4 onwards just talks through the balance that we try to make from ensuring that all of our staff members have the required competence and are able to mitigate risks in order to ensure that we provide the best possible service to our citizens, but also balance that between the requirements that we put on staff members for required learning and also elements of compliance fatigue, demands on workforce resource strain, as well as some key areas that I draw your attention to around what actually are we seeking to drive from required learning. So is it to increase staff competence and skill, or is it to seek to do behavioural change? And in which case, is it the best approach that we look at any learning module, or do we seek to do something a little bit differently to get the required behavioural change that we are seeking? I'm also draw your attention to 2.91, which talks about whistleblowing, and that seeks to just address some of the issues that come from governance and audit in relation to our whistleblowing process. You will see from that as a result of reviewing our whistleblowing processes, we saw the need to further strengthen employee understanding and awareness, alongside the willingness to report issues on a whistleblowing perspective. And as part of that review, we undertook a number of work streams, which was around simplifying language, for instance, and referencing it as the speak out line, undertaking surveys, engaging with our trade union colleagues, and then enhancing our induction process to look at having whistleblowing as an area that an individual would have to go in, read, understand, and tick to say they've done so. I've also included a snippet from our IDAV system. Apologies that this looks a bit stretched. It wasn't easy to kind of drop it in to the document, but it just seeks to show you that workplace compliance is part of a more rounded review that we have in terms of induction as a whole as an organisation. We also seek to look about to ensure that an individual, when they're coming into us, understands about the Vale, understands around our corporate plan and our ADP, understands working at the Vale and can navigate through our recognised mechanics that we've got for staff communication, for instance, and also talks to them about the democratic process for those that are completely green coming into working for a local authority, alongside the workplace compliance. You will see on the right hand side there is a little circle that indicates the induction process. This one is mine. It was just presented to just give you an indication. I have completed my induction. It was just there to give you an indication of actually, if I hadn't completed it, what that would look like. And so a manager can track that during an employee's induction and probation process, and they won't be signed off their probation process until that is shown as 100% compliant. So we were just seeking to come here to just bring this in terms of the required learning, to seek to get an understanding from you that we do have significant requirements put on us as a department for required learning. So we have a lot of separate departments that come to us asking for us to build e-learning modules as a way to address certain issues that we've got within the local authority. And currently that's sat at over 30 modules that we've had requests for. If we sought to bring all of those in, it would be unwieldy for us. And actually, I'm not sure if that would seek to address some of the behavioural change that we would be looking for. So I really bring this to you for further review and for thought. And I thank you for listening.
Thank you, Tracy. Yeah, grateful for your contribution and for bringing the report to us. Quick question for me before I hand over to members. And just indulge me if you would, because it may well be this is something that is included in a bigger piece. But I was expecting to see modules on DSE, equality and diversity, and the Welsh language measures, responsibility on us as individuals and as an organisation where that is concerned. Can you just reassure me that those are modules and that is mandatory for starters? Thank you.
Yes, of course. I can't assure you that they're modules because they're not. They sit within the induction process, but they're not specific modules. So we do in the section about the Vale and working for the Vale, we do talk about our strategic equalities plan. We do talk about our DSE assessments. We signpost individuals, for instance, to our health and safety pages so that they can ensure that they know what to do around DSE assessments. But they're not currently e-learning modules from a local authority perspective, but they are built into the induction process, if that gives you some reassurance. But they're not e-learning modules currently.
With the Welsh language measures, is that made quite clear in there as well?
In terms of the Welsh language measures, they are signposted. Is it quite clear? We probably need to go back and have a look at that, but it's something that I can bring back and comment on further if that would be helpful. But they're certainly signposted too within the induction process.
Sorry, I hadn't put my my microphone on. Thank you very much, Tracy. Committee, do we have any questions then for her? Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tracy, for the presentation. It's not so much a question, it's more an observation, mainly from my own experiences, actually, because I think all of us, both as elected members and indeed in our professional lives, are asked to carry out training through modules like IDEV from time to time. I often get the sense, whether this is a fair reflection or not, that these training sessions or training exercises are almost like box ticking exercises to say that we've been trained on them. And it's probably different for council staff who tend to complete training and retraining on an ongoing basis. But if I take my own experience as an elected member, I often find you get a deluge of information at the start and a lot of training exercises you're asked to complete. And I don't think overwhelming is the right term because everybody gets through it. But I sometimes think when you're doing so much at the start, it goes in one ear, out the other, because you don't really get the time to take it all on board. And my question really is it a similar sort of process for council staff, i.e. they start here and then they're given all this training, all of these modules straight away, and it's sort of like within 14 or 28 days we need you to have completed them? Or is there a more staggered approach so that the training can actually be taken on board and it's not sort of like, let's get them all through it so we can say they've done the training, but in terms of whether they've actually been able to take all of that information on board, that happens?
Are you happy for me to come in, Chair?
Yes, please do. Please do, Tracy.
I think that's exactly what we're seeking to avoid, is that it does, that it isn't actually a tick box exercise, that it's seeking to drive both standards in terms of competence, understanding in terms of managing our risks, but also increased awareness in terms of how we best support our communities. So our approach to it currently is a little bit multifaceted to prevent that from happening. So we have got some required e-learning modules. Those required modules, as you say, that there's only 9 of them, a number of them modules, some of them just actually going in and completing and reading the document. Those e-learning modules are very engaging, actually, and they seek to test understanding throughout the requirements to complete the modules. But then we actually go further to look at learning in a different way. So we've got a face-to-face induction programme. That face-to-face induction programme is delivered by different members of the local authority, including the Director of Corporate Resources, Tom, who's with me now, and the Chief Executive. So they seek to address key issues, talk about the importance of key matters to us as a local authority, so that actually we have different styles and different approaches to learning. We're also very mindful that the way in which people learn is very different. And therefore there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, so we do need to look at different mechanisms. We're reviewing that currently, Councillor Carroll, to ensure that we're both diverse in terms of our offering and inclusive and accessible in how that comes forward. So we are actively seeking to avoid the kind of tick box style approach that you talk through, and we're looking to do that in a variety of different ways in terms of our approach to that training and the delivery of that learning, if that makes sense.
And just one to follow up, Chair. Forgive me if I've misunderstood the report. Asbestos awareness, is that mandatory for all staff?
Yes, it is currently. So it is something that we're reviewing with our health and safety team. The reason it's mandated for all our staff currently is because we are seeking for them to seek to ensure that they've got a level of competence and understanding that there could be asbestos in the places of their workplaces.
That was going to be my next question.
It doesn't mean to say there is. It just means to say that they are seeking to appropriately identify it if they come across it. So it's by no means saying we do have asbestos. It's just to say that they could come across asbestos in the course of their work, so that they're able to identify that and that they're able to take appropriate action, that they don't put themselves in any undue risk.
Was that training something that the council implemented off its own bat, or was it instructed to do so by somebody from health and safety?
In honesty, Councillor Carroll, I can't really answer that question because it was in existence pre-me starting. However, what I will say is it's pretty normal actually to have asbestos training from a workplace perspective as a required learning. I'm not sure exactly how it came to arrive in terms of the requirements for it as this organisation, so I can't answer that question fully, but it's fairly commonplace to have asbestos awareness training in an organisation as a requirement.
Okay, it's something I've worked in the public sector. It's not something I've ever been asked to complete. So my initial reaction was, is there a particular risk of asbestos within the organisation, which is why the staff are being asked to complete the training. But thank you for your answer, Tracy.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Any other questions? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask around ICT after our discussion at the last meeting, our normal meeting. I know there's a huge amount of pressure on ICT, which is a small team in comparison to the amount of heavy lifting that ICT needs to do and does do for the organisation. So have you since then thought at all about increasing the amount of awareness on ICT in the induction? Now, it's as you pointed out in here, you've got the code of conduct, which is good, and it's good to see that there's some kind of awareness behind it. But has there been, what is your thoughts behind any additional work, even if it's just 30 minutes in induction, of more work towards here are more features to do with the ICT, here's a few tips, helpful things to know, which will make your work more efficient?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. I wish our head of digital was here in order to assist me with responding to the question, but I know what she would say is that she's actively reviewing this aspect currently from a digital perspective, and it's something that we're really key on improving moving forward. We are currently reviewing certain aspects, so you will see within the report that we've very recently developed cybersecurity and that we've rolled that out. That's not hosted on our iDev site actually, but that is something that we felt was increasingly important that our staff are aware. In terms of tips and support, that's something that we are working on. So our OD and learning team are working on in collaboration with our head of digital to look at how we improve. I think I'm answering your question, please do say if I'm not, but seeking to look at how we are more efficient, effective and utilising the IT software that we've currently got from an organisation to best effect. And we could be doing that in a better way currently.
No, that's good to hear. And also the cybersecurity module is very good, as I'm sure everyone in here has seen. So yes, that is really good to see. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Goodjohn and Tracy. Yes, we've all done, and we're up to date with our cyber essentials. That's from all of us here on this committee anyway. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Johnson, over to you.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd.
Thank you, James. I'm not sure if I missed the date, but point 2.4 of this report talks about the review of the work which will be part of the Council's People strategy. Now I see to some extent this feels like this is not a temporary review, but content of this report shows that part of the work has been done. We've got a list of the modules which need to be completed, how many people are completing them, almost 2 pages on some of the problems. Councillor Carroll noted some of the things which are already part of the report: compliance fatigue, short-term impacts, or even one size fits all in terms of the things which people are required to complete. So I would like to understand when the review work will come to an end, and then how this has been rolled out across the council, because some of these things are about working out how many modules are really required and how this fits in with work pressures and impact on people. Because we've seen the recommendation from the Audit and Governance Committee, about whistleblowing, and I accept that, but again, as Tracy mentioned earlier, many people come to the department with suggestions which in isolation can sound like, oh, you should do this, why aren't you doing that? But will this review put all of this in context to understand what types of things, which things should be required for everybody in the council to do, as opposed to things which are more important for specific departments and which are lesser importance to others? It would be interesting to see the final report coming back to explain which types of decisions the department is making and to have an explanation of this, because at the moment this seems to be something temporary, a project initiation document. We've noted some of the details, we've noted some of the things which we'd noted, but when will we have the result?
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. It's just made me think as well, some of the points he's making there, Tracy. That, all local authorities in Wales really probably should have the same mandatory requirements when it comes to new starters. So I'm just wondering, is there any parity with the other local authorities on this mandatory learning? But please answer. Obviously, Councillor Johnson's questions first. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson, and thank you, Chair. The current position is that we're hoping the review will come to an end in the autumn, so we're actively reviewing with the Head of Digital currently. Yes, the approach that we're seeking to take is to look at a more job-centred approach. So there will be some required learning for all individuals moving forward, but actually there will probably be a more bespoke approach. I'm not meaning to suggest that we haven't got an element of that currently, because there will be certain roles. So for instance, from a safeguarding perspective, there are a number of roles that require above the foundation level of safeguarding that's required for everybody across the organisation currently. So we are taking a bit more of a job-centred approach, and we're seeking to have that completed by the autumn. So we can certainly bring that back to you at that point if that was something that this committee would be seeking. Sorry, Chair, just I've remiss of me, really. I forgot to answer your question around comparisons with other local authorities. We have done some interim work on that. We don't have all of the local authorities back yet. We've got a couple still to pull in. We're also seeking local authorities, not just in Wales, but more broadly. And currently, ours are not dissimilar, but as I said, we haven't got that total set of results back yet, but we'll do by the time the review is completed.
Thank you, Tracy. I think there might be some economies of scale here if, as I said, we're all commissioning the same type of training because it's a mandatory thing. We could probably do some work together on that. Councillor Johnson, are you happy with that response? Do you want to come in with any further questions?
I'm happy with the response. Happy with the response, Chair. But I think that welcome maybe Tracy's suggestion of bringing the report back of in whatever format later in the year once it's been completed. Diolch.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we'll definitely wait till the autumn to see how these things pan out. Do we have any other questions, please, on this particular question? Oh, okay, that's great. So let's just move to the recommendations. They were that the committee considered the report and proposed approach and scope of mandatory required learning for council staff, and refer this report and our views to Cabinet for their consideration and endorsement. And also that committee notes the response to the recommendations of the Governance and Audit Committee with regards to the whistleblowing. So we've done that. Also, we can just add our own recommendation that we'd like to see a further report in the autumn when the learning review has been completed. So can I have a hand to move on that one, please?
Happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor John, and seconder, Councillor Hamilton. That's great. Thanks, committee.
Sorry, Chair, can I just double check in terms of, was there any specific comments to go back to Cabinet for consideration? Did we want to include?
If it's not too arduous a task, I'm happy for all of our comments to go back, if that's okay, Mark.
Okay, I'll obviously specify that in the recommendations. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's move to agenda item 6. This is the report of the voluntary services, Glamorgan Voluntary Services GVS. It's the annual report from the year before last, 2022-23. I think we welcome Rachel Connor here tonight to take us through the report. Here she is. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Just really to reiterate what you've already said, that this is a report for the work that was undertaken in the year 22-23. So some of it does seem a little behind the wheel, as it were. So we're looking really at what was achieved during that year. And I guess 2022-23, for all of us, whichever sector we were working in, we were still emerging in many ways from the pandemic and everything that had come with that and how that had impacted on all services across all sectors. So it was an extraordinarily busy year when our year's not busy within third sector, but we had a variety of achievements that are highlighted throughout this report that we're proud of and that we're pleased. So I think, as with everybody, we really did have to shift many of our services through to digital platforms, and our website in particular was very much used throughout the year in question. We are happy that the website looks good. It's very interactive. It's kept very up to date. That's something that we pride ourselves on. And I guess it's from that we are able to offer that range of information around the services that we offer, the services that the rest of the sector offers, learning opportunities and updates on what's happening throughout the Vale of Glamorgan. Added to this, social media has become more and more important for all of us. And so there's been a very comprehensive delivery of social media posts across all community hubs throughout the Vale, as well as our own Facebook and other social media presence. So a lot of our training has actually been delivered through social media as well, and it's proven to be very effective. GVS, Glamorgan Voluntary Services, is part of something called TSSW, which is Third Sector Support Wales, which includes all county voluntary councils across Wales, together with Wales Council for Voluntary Action. And together we've developed a variety of digital platforms that enable ourselves and members of the public to access information quickly and effectively. So we share a funding portal, and we share a volunteering portal. And then we have a couple of digital platforms that are purely internal across TSSW, and those were developed in the main in 22-23, was a CRM, customer relationship management system, and also a learning hub for staff. So it was very interesting to hear what Tracy was saying about keeping staff up to date and keeping their knowledge and skills honed. That's certainly something that we endeavour to do within our own sector. So we have offices and bases across the Vale, currently Llantwit Major, Barry and Penarth. And it's from there that we're delivering our development and advice services, usually on a one-to-one basis, but it could be that development officers actually invite groups or management committees of groups to come and access that one-to-one support and advice. So it could be things like, how do you register as a charity, putting together a governing document, making sure that the right policies and procedures are in place for each individual organisation. So a lot of organisations with a range of support from GVS on helping them develop their ideas and projects took place throughout that time period. Mentioned our website again. An awful lot of our information is there, and it is easily accessible, and it enables our members to access that information at times that suits them, perhaps rather than the normal office hours. One of our key roles is to provide information for our members, and we do it in a variety of ways. Talked about social media, talked about website. But Vista, the GVS magazine, it's produced in-house 3 times a year, and there are over 1,000 groups and individuals that receive it. But we also produce a health, social care and wellbeing bulletin on a fortnightly basis, and a sustainable funding news bulletin as well, which is done on a monthly basis. So a range of information sheets in both English and Welsh for voluntary organisations that they can download from the website or pick up from ourselves in hard copy. And thinking about people using or not using social media and not using digital services, then we do still provide practical services for our member groups. So it could be that they're borrowing items of equipment, but equally we provide a design and print service for small community groups wanting to publicise their activities or their events. So we help them to design pop-ups, we help them to design leaflets, their annual reports, whatever it is that they require. That information element is followed through with a variety of network and fora. And probably the largest network that we have is the Health, Social Care and Wellbeing Network. And that covers basically a wide range of our member organisations. Not everybody participates, but well over 450 groups do participate in that forum on a regular basis. Some of those meetings are in person, but the majority of them are these days done online, saving time for organisations where staff resource is getting thinner and thinner on the ground. It's inevitable that a funding advice service is top of the list of requirements from our members. And throughout that year, support was provided to 81 groups, and they reported back, not all of them, it has to be said, because quite often they're too happy and too busy with the success of their funding to let us know that they've been successful. But we were informed from some of those groups who'd received support that over £650,000 worth of funding was obtained as a result directly of the advice and information given by GVS staff. A variety of other information there about the funding advice support that we give. So we hold funding events where we invite representatives from funders like National Lottery, Heritage Lottery, Moondance. It could be any organisation that is providing resource to third sector to deliver basically a surgery so that groups can book a one-to-one session to see whether their idea, whether their project meets the criteria and would fly with that particular funder. So, it is high on the list of priorities for all of us, whether we're in the local authority or whether we're in the third sector. Accessing resource is still absolutely key. And the competition for groups from the Vale has always been tough in accessing funds from the large funders, those that cover the whole of Wales or indeed the UK, because competition is extraordinarily strong. And the Vale is always, despite some of the statistics that Tom and Andreas were talking about earlier, is still viewed as a whole as being the leafy Vale. So groups can be disadvantaged when applying for funds in a highly competitive arena. Training is an area that we're very keen to ensure that our member groups have access to. And each year we undertake a survey to discover what training needs are out there and try to meet the requirements of our members to the best of our ability. And during 22-23, what they were asking for was information and training on becoming a trustee, recruitment, selection and management of volunteers, data protection issues, Zoom essentials, so meetings like this, getting organisations completely geared up to being able to participate in them, making sure that organisations were fit to access funding, introducing them to Twitter, and community shares being explained. So you'll see from the report that 126 delegates attended the training courses, all of them thinking it was good or excellent. Lots of one-to-one media training courses have been undertaken throughout that year. It says 5 there, but there were it was 5 organisations, and the numbers attending it was actually on a one-to-one basis. So I think Mark was delivering training to individuals for an organisation, and some of those organisations had 3, 4 and 5 attendees. The partnership and consultation working, I know that my colleagues, officers within the local authority are fully aware of just how massive that task is. We are all attending many partnership and joint working groups to ensure that we are getting the best possible value out of resources, out of funding that's coming to the Vale and indeed across the health region, so that the Vale is making sure that we access as much as we possibly can. And third sector is invited to the majority of the list of joint working groups, etc., that are listed within the report. I mentioned the Health, Social Care and Wellbeing Network. We received some funding from the Health Board. Originally it was from Welsh Government, but it's been tracked through Health Board to employ a facilitator for health and social care and wellbeing. It's a massive agenda, as you can well imagine. And that particular network is extraordinarily busy and active, working across all sorts of topics and service areas, whether it's clinical specialisms, whether it's carers, whether it's older people, whether it's Alzheimer's, whether it's mental ill health. The range is enormous, and the topics that are discussed at those networks covers a very vast range. So we, like many other organisations, including the local authority, have committed to becoming a dementia-friendly organisation, and we continue to do that, working with officers in the local authority, so Miles Utting and his team, to make sure that we're still up to date on that. We are participating with the Regional Partnership Board to we produced 3 films during 22-23 for third sector organisations. There were lots of organisations that would have liked to have been the focus of the films, but we had to whittle it down to just 3. And you'll see that Moss Rose Cottage was one, Women Connect First was another, and Motion Control Dance was the third. So lots and lots of interesting information coming out of those films. I think it's important to remember that the carer representative on the Regional Partnership Board is unpaid and a carer themselves. And so ourselves and our counterparts in Cardiff provide a lot of support to the unpaid carer representatives to ensure that their voice is heard on the Regional Partnership Board. And I know that there are colleagues and councillors who have participated in those boards and know that they're enormous and that they can be very intimidating, I think, for the people who are not used to attending such meetings and such business meetings. So we managed a considerable number of grant schemes during 22-23. So either bidding for them from Welsh Government or indeed the Regional Partnership Board, so resource from the Regional Integration Fund. We bid to Cardiff and Vale University Health Charity to run a small grant scheme across Cardiff and Vale for the third sector. There was a RIF, or a Regional Integration Fund, Third Sector Capital Investment Fund that we managed, Loneliness and Social Isolation Fund with resource from the Vale Council, and the Winter Pressures Grant, which also came via the local authority. So a lot of resource coming into the Vale and being managed by GVS, making sure that it's getting to the right organisations, the right services at the right time. Volunteering is absolutely key for any third sector organisation, and it's a large part of our work, helping members of the public find the right sort of volunteering opportunity, but equally important, supporting third sector organisations so that they're fit and ready to welcome and manage volunteers to help them deliver their services. So a lot of activity during that particular year. There was another grant that we managed on behalf of Welsh Government. It's a very small grant, but it makes a massive difference to youth-led projects and activities within the Vale of Glamorgan. So just under £6,000 was distributed, was allocated to the Vale by Welsh Government and distributed by ourselves to different projects. A key area that Tom has mentioned that we have found ourselves working within is that of food poverty. Initially, our food share project was set up in response to food waste. So collecting waste from local supermarkets across the Vale, but also venturing as far as Bridgend and indeed Cardiff. And receiving resource, paying for resource from the Fair Share scheme. It did, as you can well imagine, through COVID, and slightly before that, but certainly COVID and beyond into cost of living crisis, become a real necessity in addressing food poverty. And I know that the meeting was looking at people in work who are in receipt of benefits. We have a lot of people who are in work who attend to access the food pantry service. And in 2022-23, we had over 2,860 visits to the service, which operates on a Thursday for just an hour and a half. And we know that of those visits, it ranges between about 50 and 70 individuals turning up each week. We're supporting a knock-on number of people, at least 3 for each of those individuals who attend. And in some cases, it's considerably more. I think we have a couple of Afghani families that are large families and require a lot of support with regards to accessing food. One of the remarkable things about taking on a building in the Western Vale at CF61 and Illtyd House is that we have grounds, areas not particularly large, but areas that could be turned into gardens and produce food and become a resource for the local population. And our gardening project has massively improved the community spaces around the buildings there. And in 2022-23, there were 10 GVS volunteers. I have to tell you, there's over 30 now. So everybody getting involved, providing play areas for children, growing food for the food share project, all linking in and providing really important social connection and physical activity for 30-odd people within Llantwit Major. We have volunteers who are running the food share project itself, and they have been extraordinarily supportive, all of them having joined us on day one and still being with us 5 years later. So I mentioned the buildings. We are the leaseholders of the old youth centre in Llantwit Major, that's CF61, a wide range of activities taking place there. But we also undertook a community asset transfer from the local authority of what was the Western Vale Integrated Children's Centre, which is attached to St Illtyd School in Llantwit Major on the same site as CF61. And we renamed that Illtyd House. and a wide variety of activity takes place within that building. We're relocated our head office to the ground floor there. A variety of different groups use the building, and Age Connects are also based within the building, offering an older people's hub at Illtyd House. The Older People's Hub, as I said, they relocated from their previous base in Llantwit Major, and it's a real good alignment to the UHB's shaping our future wellbeing agenda, and clearly aligned to prevention agenda and future wellbeing of future generations Act, etc. One of the things that we're particularly proud of is that when we took over the building and renamed it Illtyd House, we managed to get a nursery back up and running within the building. So that's delivered by a commercial provider, and that's been very effective, fully utilised by the local population. We were then approached to take on St Paul's Community Centre in Penarth. It's a building owned by Newydd Housing. So we manage that and again provide a similar range of activities within that building for the local community. We're very committed to the welfare of the environment and making sure that we have a positive environmental impact, so recycling, etc. But this report is looking at 22-23, just to bring you up to date. Between February and the end of March this year, with help from our partners in the local authority, resource was accessed from Ystadau Cymru to actually install new central heating system. So it was a very ancient pipework and radiator central heating system in CF61, but also installed solar panels on the roof. So the building really now has come into the 21st century. And I think that, you know, by 2030, with a few tweaks and additions, we'll be well on our way to reducing the impact of our usage of that building and counteracting our energy usage by actually producing energy from the photovoltaic panels. Information there on the efficiencies that we try to make. We're all trying to make efficiencies, aren't we, due to resource reductions. So that's kind of inevitable that we'll focus on that as a third sector organisation. Mentioned that we run a variety of projects, and in 22-23, food share and volunteering projects, which previously mentioned. But we also, via the local authority, employ a Vale Community Liaison Officer. And this post takes referrals from health and social care staff, particularly from Contact One Vale, to focus on families, carers, young adults that usually fall outside of the usual social services remit. So it's quite a bit of preventative work. It's a lot of one-to-one support, helping people access the relevant services and ensuring that they get the help that they need from those services. We were also in 22-23 funded by Vale Council to work on the Dewis portal. No longer involved in that, except that as part of Third Sector Support Wales, we developed something called Info Engine, which is a digital platform of services and information on third sector organisations across Wales, and that feeds into Dewis. So still involved, but not on a local basis. That's it from me, Chair. I could go on for much longer talking about the work that is involved within the wider third sector and all of the massive impact that we're so fortunate to have here in the Vale of Glamorgan, coming from small local groups working extraordinarily hard to deliver the right services at the right time to people within their communities. So thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Yes, I know the residents of Lantwit and Penarth and Barry that very well served by GVS. A quick question for me before we ask other members, and I appreciate we were concentrating there on a report which is from last year, so it's not really asking you questions of what you did then, but I'm just curious to know how, and if you do actually do any kind of outreach type of work for the more rural communities, so that you kind of like would bring GVS to them in terms of offering up the volunteering opportunities, and also I suppose to see if there are any people interested in volunteering. So if you do already do that sort of outreach, or if you would consider it in the future, I'd certainly be interested. Thank you. Do we have any other questions anyway before from any of our committee members? No? Okay.
Just to answer your question, Chair, yeah, we do indeed take the volunteering offer out to different parts of the Vale, and we do that in the form of volunteering fairs. So, for example, if we're holding a volunteering fair in Penarth, it will be local Penarth third sector organisations that we invite to come along and have a stall, so that members of the public can access volunteering right on their doorstep, as it were, and get involved within their local community. But of course, GVS is also there, and we've got an array of goodness, I think it's on over 900 volunteering opportunities that are available.
Wow.
A lot of them in the Vale, but obviously people are willing to travel to Cardiff or Bridgend. So we make sure that we've got that information available to everybody. Yeah, it's massive. And we have noticed a falling off of volunteers. There was a massive peak during the pandemic, which was fantastic to see. And it did last for probably 18 months after the pandemic. But I guess everybody returning to their normal working days meant that there has been quite a considerable drop-off of volunteering. So any help that we can get from our partners in the local authority to publicise the benefits of volunteering and the importance of volunteering would be gratefully received. Thank you.
Great. Well, consider yourself welcomed and invited to St Bride's Ward. That would be wonderful if we could get you coming out to us. Do we have any other questions anyway before we wrap up on this particular agenda item? No? Okay, that's great. Can I just thank you for coming as well tonight, Rachel? It's really, really good of you to give us your time and a very detailed report as well on the work of GVS. It's really, really appreciated. Okay then, so we'll just swiftly move to recommendations if we can. And that's that the committee considers and notes the contents of this report. So it's quite a short and easy one. So can I have a hand to move, please?
Happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and a seconder, Councillor Hamilton. That's great. Okay, so we'll swiftly move on towards the end of this meeting. So that is agenda item 7, which were any items that the chair's decided are urgent part 1. There aren't any. Moving to part 2. This is the public and press exclusion part, and we don't have any items here that I've got that have decided are urgent. So that means that we can conclude this meeting. Thank everybody from committee and from the contributors, from officers for coming. Date of our next meeting will be the 22nd of May. So please have a pleasant evening, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, everyone.